People are leaving Florida. They're leaving Florida in droves from big cities. They're leaving it to smaller areas. They're leaving it from the entire state perspective and headed elsewhere. And I'm going to go over how you can capitalize on that if you're buying a home, or also how you can capitalize that if you're selling a home. So let's talk about why people are leaving. Besides the obvious fact that prices are high in Florida, okay? I've been here for 42 years and prices used to be good here, not anymore. If you didn't buy a house before 2020, then chances are you are buying something at a very, very, very extended price in the market. And the problem is that when you consider the value of a home, you also have to consider what comes with it. So you have insurance, taxes, HOA fees, these sorts of things. All right. So if you encompass that all together, what you have here in Florida is you have a huge spike in prices over the past 5 years. And you also have massive increases in insurance because of hurricanes. You have property taxes that are much, much higher than they were prior to 2020. And now you have these, if you're buying a condo or some kind of a townhome, something with an association fee, they've stacked on massive amounts of fees with these properties simply because of failed milestone inspections, okay? In case you haven't heard, there was a condo that collapsed down in Miami a few years back, and because of that collapsed building, they required all condos in Florida to go through a milestone inspection where they basically did a full-on investigation of the structure and required every condo building that wasn't up to structural code to bring it up to code. Well, what they did was they gave them a certain amount of time to do this, and they stacked that money that was required to do those repairs onto the association fees. So a lot of association fees with condos and these other properties went through the roof, okay? That is the main issue in Florida, why people are leaving. It's why people are not moving here as much. The migration levels are way down. It's simply because the affordability levels are way, way too excessive for what people make here, which is the number 2 problem we have in Florida and why people leave. It's because the income levels are much, much lower than they are in other states, okay? So if you come here and you move to Florida, you're really going to be, we don't have many big companies here, right? In Miami, you might find some stuff down there, but mostly what you're going to find is construction jobs, government jobs, retail jobs. That's what dominates Florida's market for homes. And because of that, you think about like Amazon, some of these big companies that could build factories here. There's almost no factories in Florida. And it's simply because of hurricanes and stuff like that. All right. They just really don't. It's just that the job market here is much slimmer than it is elsewhere in many of the other states around the United States. But for us, retail, construction, government, that's what people are getting to, or real estate, of course, real estate. But you can kind of tie that into the retail market as well. But those are the main job occupants here. And there's so many realtors around, it's crazy. You can, everybody, some people say that like everybody in Florida is a realtor, which is true because it's a very, very popular job here. But the problem is that when you look at the value of homes and what the average home sells for, and then you look at what the average household income is, there's a massive offset, okay? So the household income in Florida, it's around, the average household income in Florida is around $80,000, give or take, okay? And then the average home value in Florida is around $375,000. Let's just say around $400,000. Okay. The problem is that when you break down mortgage payments and all that information, what you find is that in order to afford a mortgage in Florida, you actually need to make closer to $100,000 per household. That is one of the biggest problems with our area, is that you have that discrepancy. You have the job market that is limited, and then you have the pay that is lower, while at the same time you have expensive houses, and those expensive houses come with the insurance, come with the taxes, and potentially come with an association fee. So because when you incorporate it all together, most buyers that jump into the Florida market, they start to look around, they start to get their figures together, and they realize, I can't afford a house here. There's no way, right? The house they want is unaffordable, which is usually, in most cases, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home is what most people, that's the biggest market. A single family, 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. And when most people can't buy that home, buyers just back out of the market completely, and they go do something else. Simple as that. Now, the other things that affect Florida right now is the fact that 2020, during COVID, a lot of people moved to Florida because they were allowed to work remotely. They were allowed to leave New York and come down here and get the same pay, have the same job, and be able to work remotely. Well, that's all changed now. They're not allowing that anymore. Most companies are calling people back to the office, and they're no longer able to live in Florida and work for New York. So we're seeing that take place, where people living here are moving back to their original states, right? At the same time, we're also seeing a mass influx of people not just leaving Florida, but if you look at it from a city perspective, you can see that areas like Miami, areas like Tampa, the metro downtown areas, we see people moving to the rural areas outside of these districts, okay? So you can get somewhere, like we're in the Tampa Bay area, right? You can live in Tampa and buy a house for $500,000 right there in Tampa. Probably going to be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, and maybe 2,000 square foot. That's what you get in Tampa. Now, if you drive an hour north, you can get that same home for about $350,000. Okay, that's the difference. All right, and that's why people in these big metro areas are actually moving out. They're finding other ways to work, or they're willing to travel further to get there. Now, another big issue that we have in Florida, not so bad in the Tampa Bay area, but if you go to Orlando or you go down to Miami and you go down there anywhere near the rush hour traffic, or you're driving around on the weekend, the traffic is getting really bad because there's so many people here now. The traffic is getting really, really bad. So people in general, they just don't want to deal with that. They move out of those areas. They move a little bit north. They try to find occupations where they can move out, and that's the way it goes. So that's one of the other issues that we're having. Now, the one positive thing, if you're buying a house in Florida, is this: prices are down. Okay, the prices are down pretty good right now. You're talking in most areas anywhere from 15 to 25% from the peak. Okay, from the 2022, 2023 peak, a lot of houses are starting to soften up, and you're starting to see that if you go on Zillow and you look at a Zestimate of a house and you see what it was selling for, what the Zestimate was a few years ago, you're going to see that there's a pretty decent discount there, and that's just based on the list price. Okay, on average, most homes in Florida are going about 5% from the list price. Okay, so if you see something that's had 3 or 4 discounts on it and it's still sitting there, it hasn't had an offer on it in a while, it has never gone pending, then you could probably go in there and get an additional 5 to 10% discount on a house like that. So if you find a house that, say, you look at the Zestimate, it's down 20% from where the peak was, and you make a 10% offer, you're now getting a house discounted at about 30%, which to me is a pretty solid deal. Florida's market is very volatile. We go up price-wise, we go down price-wise. So if you can have 30% or 20% upside on a property, I think that is a reasonable deal that you should consider, because you now have a price target to aim towards. In the future you'll have equity growth, and the biggest hurdle you have to get over is your monthly affordability, right? So if you can get a good discount, calculate your monthly premiums, and be comfortable knowing that you are going to be able to make these payments temporarily until interest rates go down, and then you can strategize to refinance that property, bring your mortgage premiums down, bring your rates down, and then you could have that to look forward to. There's also talk about the taxes being eliminated in Florida. We don't quite have a 100% answer on that because they're still trying to get it passed through the Senate and Congress in Florida. but it is in the works, okay? That could be a big relief for a lot of people with regards to taxes, okay? Now, the other thing is that in reality, despite all of this, despite all of the pricing, the high prices, the taxes, the insurance, despite all of that, we've had a very strong spring season. Very, very strong spring season. So what we've seen is that there's a lot of sellers that are on the sidelines. You know, they don't want to give up their current interest rates. They don't want to go buy something with a higher interest rate, just like any other buyer would not. And a lot of those sellers have not put their house on the market, okay? So we've seen a very close supply and demand factor in Florida since about January, where the buyers and sellers were at pretty equal numbers. So if your house is a reasonably decent house, the presentation is good, your odds of getting a buyer in there is going to be really good because there's less competition on the market right now. And we're seeing that play out a lot around my area here in Tampa. And when we look at the numbers in Florida in general, it's all kind of playing out the same way. So it looks like we could be at the bottom of our market here, okay? And if that's the case, if they can get interest rates to where more buyers can come into the market and you can stay on par with the supply and demand, meaning the sellers and the buyers stay pretty close, even wise, as to the total numbers of new listings coming out and a total number of buyers coming into the market, and there's the real potential that taxes could be eliminated or could be a big relief when it comes to affordability and people getting pre-approved, I do think that we might be at the bottom of the market here. So the opportunity from them would be just a time period of consolidation where you still will have opportunities to buy properties. Sellers will have opportunities to take advantage of the market conditions. And then moving forward into the future, prices would start to slowly go back up. That is something that could really play out over the course of the next 6 months. Now, it's all predicated on interest rates. I think that if interest rates don't go down, then and people still continue to try to sell their houses despite the market, then you will see that prices start to go back down. But so far, what we've seen in the past several months, since January, is that simply not the case. We're seeing prices stabilize. We're seeing month-over-month prices flatline, and we're seeing more pending transactions, okay? So there is some very positive news in the fact that if the real estate market does start to tick back up, Florida, being volatile like it is, usually goes up more than a lot of other states. And if you can catch the bottom, which I think we might be at or are really close to it, there's a lot of upside for potential there, whether you're buying to own a home and have equity in it, or if you're considering, buying something and holding it for a long term. This is an opportunity that doesn't come around very often. I mean, the last time this kind of opportunity really presented itself was in the years of like 2010 through 2013. Okay, so it was a little bit over a decade ago that this kind of opportunity presented itself. So for me, it is a chance for you as a consumer to go out there and get a reasonable deal on a house and play your cards right, get a good deal, get a discount, get some concessions in, and you can get a good sale. If you're selling your house, you can still find great buyers out there. There's a lot of good deals happening on the selling side, and I think the market conditions are better than what people assume they are. So that's it for this week. And of course, we do work real estate. So if you're in Tampa or the Tampa Bay area or around this area, we hit the ground pretty hard around here. So if you're looking to buy or to sell or anything like that, we're here and we're happy to help. All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.